Welcome to episode 10.
Yeah,
Let's just
episode 10.
pretend.
Let's call it 10.
We're going to talk about social anxiety. And it's near and dear to our hearts because we both are afflicted by it. I'll start with saying when I tell people I have social anxiety, they're like, no way. And I'm like, way.
It's like the ultimate feeling though sometimes too, because you're just, I remember people saying that to me too, like, wait, you had social anxiety? And I was like, yeah, I was the kid that if I had to answer roll call and say here, they'd be like, wow, this guy actually talks. Like it was just, I think we both have that experience. So we're recovering social angst people.
Well, I don't really feel like I'm recovering. Like I think there was a point where I was like, maybe it's gone, but actually I just selected myself out of most of the interactions that caused it, you know? And even like genuinely, just to be fully vulnerable, every time we hang out with you, before we leave, I'm like mildly anxious. And the second we hang out, I am completely like every time we hang out, it's very like time just flies by, and here Nori waitresses are like, "You guys need to get the fuck up," because we're taking too long at the table. But and I think people without social anxiety, they think that it's this person who's really uncomfortable in their skin and has a really hard time in social situations. What it actually is the lead up is the worst part. Like the anticipation is so much worse than the actual experience. When it's happening, you're kind of just, it kind of goes by and you're not as in your head for the most part. But when you're leading up to the event, prior to the event, that's when you're looking for an escape.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so wrapped up in this premeditation of what's about to come. And that's what anxiety is all about. Social anxiety as well. So when it comes to talking about it, I really like the way you put it because like I like to think about it like this. Like one of my buddies, they were going on a road trip with their parents and they were really young and their parents told them that we're going to Texas. And they were so upset the whole ride because they're like, we don't want to go to Texas. What's in Texas? There's no fun things to see. But what they didn't realize was that they were actually headed towards a cruise in Texas that was going to take them somewhere else. So they were so upset the whole ride that the parents felt so angry that they finally had to tell them, like, no, we're actually going on a cruise. Would you all get over it? And the car ride went from being the worst car ride from hell to this location to, wow, we're going on the most awesome trip, coupled with a bit of like awkwardness from the previous like frustrations. And so nothing changed about the car ride, but everything changed about their internal state. And I think that's a really good way to think about anxiety. It's more so in the mind. And I think it's good to go over some specifics on like, well, how do you work with that period of time and what are some ways to get over it?
I think it's funny. Well, I like that example. That example works, but I also think it's funny because the moral of that story is, thank God we don't actually have to vacation in Texas.
Yeah, sorry, people who love Texas.
I mean, I personally don't have any desire to go to Texas.
Yeah,
no
me
offense.
Me neither.
I actually don't care if that offends you.
I'm a good cop.
I mean, I have no problem with Texas. I play video games with this dude who lives in Texas all the time.
He's done with you now.
He's cool. I don't think he knows who I actually am.
What?
He just knows me by my username.
Wow.
But I do feel like I feel like there are expectations that often get in the way of people's experience of an event. So, you know, this person is in a car thinking they're going to Texas, and so they have expectations of what the experience will be, and that's what kind of gets in their head. And when you have social anxiety, it's often the expectations you transpose onto a situation that keeps you from actually just being present in the situation. So if you are going on a date and you have social anxiety and you think, oh, well, I have to kiss this person at the end of the date. I have to. It's my job as a man, whatever, right? And then the date happens and all you're thinking about is that outcome. Well, number one, it might not lead to that. And number two, you're not really just going with the flow of conversation because you're constantly preoccupied with how you think it should go.
Yeah. And because anxiety and fear in general is just all about survival. And so something that I think is really important to remember when you're thinking about fear is that it can often become associated with this problem that you need to get rid of. In reality, fear is something that gives you the resources to deal with some sort of incoming threat. But the problem happens when the threat is now, does this girl like me or not? Or does my boss appreciate me? Or am I going to be able to get an A in this class? And it's like this over assumption of how high the stakes are. So when it comes to dealing with anxiety, it's how do you lower the stakes? And if you can lower the stakes, then you get into the state of flow, psychologists call it, that allows you to be actually the more effective version of you in those moments. You don't want to be in a state of flow, I would say, as much when you're dealing with like a bear chasing you. You want to not be able to think at all and just run for the hills or whatever, or left and right, or lay on the ground, whatever you're supposed to do with that specific
I would
bear.
argue you're in flow if you're being chased by a bear. You're
Really?
forced to be in flow. Yeah, I mean, you're forced to not think but just react.
Mm.
I mean, you might not, but what you're getting at, I mean, my thesis, I kind of laundered in half social anxiety, half rejection sensitivity, because I wanted an excuse to study social anxiety.
Yeah.
And if you look at the research on social anxiety, the number one construct that you measure to see if someone has it is this concept of fear of negative evaluation. So if you have a fear of being negatively evaluated, you're going to have a high probability of social anxiety. And the examples that you were just using are all examples where there's a possibility someone's negatively evaluating you. And the key point of this is it's not the frequency of being negatively evaluated by your peers is not what causes social anxiety, because then every celebrity on earth would have social anxiety just by the sheer volume of negative evaluation. It's the fear of it. It's the perception of it. Because when you're perceiving it, it's not so much that it's happening in reality or not happening in reality. It's that it's guaranteed happening in your reality. And that's the only thing that matters.
Yeah. And I would even add that you are holding a lot of weight to those people's judgments of you. And then that slowly is shifting to your own internal critic. Like you're saying, like it's these, like you said, it doesn't matter how many people think negatively of you. Like Kobe Bryant was incredible because he didn't care if the whole crowd was booing him. They even made a commercial about that, like he's just like music to my ears,
Yeah.
And it's like, that's because the weight of, the weight of importance given to the crowd is very low because there's something else that he's trusting in the moment. And so one of the ways to deal with social anxiety is to realize that what evaluation do you listen to, and how do you start listening to effective sources of evaluation?
Yeah. And why are you, so let's pretend that you are going to give me the benefit of the doubt that I've accurately diagnosed you with social anxiety. Okay. So now we're operating under that premise. Why do you think it's there? Like, what about you specifically has created an expectation above what's actually happening that people are negatively evaluating you? Like, where does that come from? I mean, there's a lot of, I'm curious to hear what you think about that. But one of the first things that comes to mind for me is if you're assuming that people are intensely critical and that they're intensely critical all the time, who's modeled that behavior to you? Who in your life growing up was intensely critical, and therefore you have taken this jump without realizing it, just assuming that that's the case with everyone?
Yeah. And it's like, where is the blame going when you do that? Because like when you think back to the past about people who might have judged you a whole lot, and now, so the first step then is to take a step back and say, well, hey, my automatic thought is that those people from the past are right. And then after you assume that they're right, you choose to listen to that voice and then assume that it's also true of the new circle that you're in. And so it's like, once you start to challenge that, and that's why I always say too, that working through social anxiety can be challenged a lot through anger, because now if you get fed up to a point where you realize like, wait a minute, I'm not the bad character in the story when I'm being judged by a crowd of people that laugh at the way that I talk. they're the bad characters in the story and they're weird for making a big deal out of this.
Mhm.
So then once that shift happens, you have the energy to now not look at yourself as the obstacle that needs to be destroyed, but the judgment and opinions of others. And you start to devalue that with anger. But I think that's a huge part of it, because when you start looking towards the past and how the people criticize you, sometimes the first way to get rid of anxiety and shame associated with that is to think, how messed up was it that they judged you that way?
I don't even think you necessarily, I mean, that's one way to develop social anxiety. Another way to develop social anxiety is to just be around someone who's critical of others. Like, you don't even have to necessarily be the recipient of it. If as long as you're around someone that's constantly making negative comments about people around you, the unconscious belief that you internalize is like, just in general, people are incredibly critical and unforgiving. And therefore, every minor deficiency that I'm expressing is going to be picked up on and internally criticized. And I think that jump in logic happens without you even realizing it. And you get to a point where you've never questioned the premise, like, oh, but how many people, and then the other thing is like you were saying a second ago, let's pretend that someone, let's pretend that you're accurately identifying someone being critical toward you. You're assuming that that criticism is fair. Why not assume that, which is I think more accurate, that for people who are incredibly critical, the people that they're critical toward just serve as a mirror towards their own inadequacy rather than a reflection of your flaws. Like, in a lot of ways, when people are operating on an unconscious level in a social environment, the ways they're interacting with each other is just this mirror of themselves being reflected into the world. It's a lot easier to criticize someone else than it is to look at my own flaws. And oftentimes, I mean, people who are incredibly critical tend to have very thin skin on their own.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah,
know?
I agree. I agree. That's really good shadow work in there, because if you think about shadow work, you're looking at, well, what is it that sweeps me off my feet, and that is likely the same quality that's both internal and external to other people. So when it comes to anxiety and thinking about that with other people, when people judge you, that's very likely that they see the world in that way, and that's why sometimes the biggest bullies have, like you said, the thinnest skin, because they are afraid to fall in that box. So it's really this redirection of how they're feeling. Like, I'm going to make fun of this kid because they're lame and they're desperately holding on to the status quo of whatever group they're in.
Mm-hmm.
So if they even look like what they're judging remotely, then they're going to freak out and have a panic attack themselves. And so the healing sounds like it's not so much winning that battle with the bully, but letting the bully poke and say, hey, I don't like your shoes. And like, oh, thank you. Yeah, I bought these like 10 years ago. Thanks. And they're like, wait, I didn't get any reaction out of you?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's like I should get a reaction of you because I would react to that. And it's like, and the flip side of that is like an incredibly picture like an incredibly forgiving person. They probably are much more okay with someone making a critical comment of them because they've figured out the shortcut solution to all of this, which is like, whether or not I'm sweating during a speech, or I just did poorly on an exam, or my outfit is not matching, that's not that big a deal. Like, as long as you are as long as you can develop a forgiving nature toward yourself and others, then all of these imperfect expressions are not really a reflection of our deeper sense of self. And I think a lot of times, like, this is just another random thought, but when let's say you're growing up with someone who's incredibly critical, not towards you, but just towards the world, there's a part of you that feels compelled into connecting with them. And sometimes the only way you can connect with the critical person is by being critical yourself. And so you often get pulled into even maybe pointing out things you don't even like to point out simply because it's the only way you can connect with that person.
Yeah, you're just trying to fit in, and then you slowly deny your real character, and you're losing that authenticity.
And you internalize that critical voice that makes you feel so shitty. I mean, I feel like you're comfortable talking about this, but maybe it'd be cool for us to talk about specifically like the ways our social anxiety like kind of manifested. And
Yeah.
like for me, it was I didn't even realize I had it, but there was a period of time in my teens where I just like completely, like a dying star, like fell into myself and just didn't really socialize in any way because it triggered so much shame that I felt about myself. And it wasn't until my 20s where I started to realize, like, wait a minute, like, there's actually nothing wrong with me except for the fact that I think there's something wrong with me. And oftentimes I tell clients that I'm like, at the end of this story, you have this fantasy that you're going to discover something is wrong with you, when ultimately the only thing you're going to discover is that you think there's something wrong with you, and that's what's been keeping you from growing.
Yeah, and then to talk about myself afterwards, but yeah, I probably said this 100 times, but the main source of your anxiety is not your actual performance, but it's your evaluation of your own performance before and after. So you didn't do anything wrong in the middle of your experience. Your body sends sweat down your body to help it cool down. Your body's doing everything it needs to. It gets nervous and then people judge. But really, once you walk away from your performance and you start to tell yourself, oh man, I screwed that up, that's when you start to label reality automatically without actually. And I think that ties to my story. Like, I would constantly judge my performance in every area because I thought that I needed to be what everybody wanted me to be, whenever I was in high school. Expectations. And I grew up in an environment where, and I don't know if this it's just a Southern thing or if it's a lot everywhere, but people are so, self-depreciating and making so many crazy. And if you try to stick out and do something that's authentic in yourself, that's just extremely judged. Like the culture is like, I don't care about being great. You shouldn't either. And so the people around me would always be like that, and they would make just a ton of jokes about like your flaws and never congratulate your successes. And I think I internalized that while also being at a school that was like, there was a lot of racist comments I got too. I was like at an all-white school at one point, private school, and a whole lot of microaggressions and being called nasty things about my race. Like I remember a few moments, but for me, I think one of the things that really fueled my anxiety was I thought I was the problem. I was like, well, I need to fit into that group. I started to feel like, well, if I could just start to act like them or look like them, then I'll be accepted. And so slowly my healing journey looked a lot, which is probably sort of biased, but getting more in touch with anger, because I didn't realize like how much I was directing my own anger towards myself to improve. So I kept saying, do better at this, do better at this. I was the obstacle that my anger needed to destroy. And then I learned later on, they're the obstacle. And wow, I am really actually a cool thinker, and some of the stuff I'm interested in, even if other people aren't, that's pretty much okay because it's still cool to me,
I feel like even when I met you, there was little traces of it. Like I feel like for those of you who don't know, Jacob and I, we started at a group practice together, and there's this group called consultation group where therapists share challenges they're having with certain clients and look for feedback and advice from other therapists. But the second Jacob started talking, I was like, oh my God, this guy just gets it, But I feel like when I first started hanging out with you, I almost felt like I had to like be like, you realize you get it, right? Like you realize you're totally like you're like a monster, and you're like, yeah. I'm like, no, seriously, you get it, right?
I did not believe it at that point. That you're 100% right, and I felt that way about you instantly too, and that's part of how we got this whole thing started. I was the brave one and reached to Vinny first. I'm like, hey man, you want to go grab lunch or something?
Yeah.
But yeah,
that's my avoidant attachment.
I totally did not believe it, and so you've actually helped me heal a lot by realizing like
that's what I was fishing for, the compliment there.
You got it.
No, but I
it's
think
been really good.
I think the social anxiety thing, it's very easy to self-alienate with social anxiety. It's very inviting. There's this John Mulaney joke where he's like, he wasn't specifically talking about social anxiety, but he might as well have been, where he said, I've never tried heroin, but I imagine it feels something like your friends canceling on you last minute when you're going out.
What?
I mean, I ruined that one, but it's like, it's this like a last minute avoidance of having to interact socially. But at the core, it's like like someone with social anxiety, the way they look at social interaction is that it's inherently draining. And so then I would ask you the question, like, what about it is draining? And then most of the time someone would answer something along the lines of, well, there are expectations in this circumstance. It's like, well, what if there weren't? Well, if there weren't, it would be a lot better. Well, then take them away. You know, well, if I take them away, what if people, judge me? It's like again, you're operating from the assumption that they have the same expectations. I think a lot of times, so I talk about my dissertation a lot, but like the whole concept of mentalization is the way we get to understand our own thoughts and mental states and emotional states, and the way we get to understand other people's emotional states and mental states, right? But the misunderstanding of mentalization that comes with social anxiety is, I'm going to assume that you're putting the same expectations on this social interaction as I am. And I would ask, like, hey, the next time you go to a social interaction with someone that you are familiar with, ask them what their expectations are. Ask
Mm.
someone who's extroverted what their expectations are for any given social interaction. And I guarantee you, if you both had a list, their list would be, two expectations long, and yours would be this long Victorian scroll that you have to keep undoing.
Exactly, exactly. And so that's one of the reasons I'll give this feedback. But to get over your social anxiety, you have to sabotage it. If you have social anxiety and you have this expectation, I would just say think about what you're afraid of and find a way to make what you're afraid of happen in a social situation where the stakes are low enough. If you're afraid of going and talking to someone and making a bad joke and you feel like you're not charismatic and you feel like you're uptight, but you're extremely fun with your close friends where you're just not thinking, I would say go in the social group that you're afraid and you're feeling like you're uptight and make a random joke about something that's not actually funny. And if you fail the joke and people don't laugh, you succeeded today for homework. And if you do that 3 times this week, then you are almost out of therapy already. And so when people actually do that, they start to realize how low the stakes were the whole time. And then they start to fail their homework because now they start making actually fun jokes sometimes because they're like laid back and they realize it's actually just a game.
Hmm.
It's a game, and you can gamble when it comes to that because you never had to be, I don't know, concerned about if you looked uptight, that's fine. If not, that's fine too.
It's a game because your mind's trying to solve a problem that it created. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? But you
Yeah.
don't but you don't see it as a creation of your own mind. You look at it as a problem in the world, and therefore it's an unavoidable thing that I have to deal with. But and that's why expectations are so interesting. When you start to challenge people's expectations, they're like, "Are you sure? Are you sure about that? You sure about that?" That's a very niche reference.
I got
I'm
it.
not gonna. Oh, did you get? Oh
No,
no,
no.
Wes would get that. But are you sure about that? Like, if you were to really challenge someone's expectations, what that real world reality that they assert is real, all of a sudden starts to develop holes in it. Like, oh, but do you really need to do that on the first date? Are you sure? Or is that something that you're imposing onto it? Like, something when I work with, I think this is a significant problem, especially with like heterosexual guys that have trouble dating with social anxiety, which is whenever they go on dates, the expectations that they have kind of make them inauthentic as people, and then the person that is dating them is like, I don't really like this person, but it's not them to begin with. Like, that's
Yeah.
the issue, right?
Mhm.
But I'm telling you, without fail, the number one piece of advice I give to these types of clients is stop trying to date women. Stop trying to date them and start trying to be friends with women. And I don't mean like friends with them in the back of your head, like one day I'm going to date them. I mean genuinely just look at them as people first, and actively inhibit your desire to turn something that's platonic into something that's romantic. And what normally happens is, well, number one, you develop more female friendships, which is nice and enriching itself. But number two, it kind of humanizes this group of people that you have turned into this unattainable foreign object. It humanizes them and it allows you to show them that a lot of the expectations you've been putting onto these dynamics, they never had to begin with. Like they're much more open to going with whatever flow that the situation allows for it. And so the second you realize, oh, like they're just people too, and they don't really know how to navigate this stuff, it really takes a lot of the pressure off.
I love that take on social anxiety and dating because I feel like we don't get enough of that. And I love that advice. Just be friends. Just take your time and humanize them because if you keep approaching it with this high stakes sort of thing, they're going to feel like some sort of object or a piece of meat that you're just ready to devour. Like, or they're going to feel like, oh my gosh, this person might be a creep because why would they be nervous around me? I'm just a regular human being.
It's
and I
weird.
think a lot of guys, yeah, it is. It's just weird.
They're not
Either way.
being real, and it's palpable. And I
Yeah.
feel like red pill dudes, they'd be like, "Bleh," like this is my impression of them. "Bleh," creatine. But like I feel like these red pill dudes, the issue is they'll go like, yeah, but look at all these examples where I approached it in my way and it worked. And it's like yeah, there are going to be women who have convinced themselves they are objects, and therefore when you approach them like that, they will happily accept the approach. But what I'm saying is now it's two people who are living completely in a world of expectations,
Right.
and never have an actual connection. I truly think the biggest thing that obscures the true nature of any relationship is the expectations you put on top of it. Because when you put expectations on a relationship, it obscures the true nature of the actual connection. You can't both connect and have expectations. You can have expectations about a relationship in the abstract, but in this moment, the only thing you really have is the experience. And if you put anything abstract on top of it, it's just going to make you feel more distant to the other person.
Yeah. And I mean, that's something else that I'll point out with anxiety, but it's well, just really quickly with the dating thing. I think it's so
Let's stay
fun
with
to
the
talk
dating.
about.
Stay with the dating.
The dating thing is so cool because I think that is what people think. It's like we all have our own boxed in sort of thinking, and you can think, oh, I can go left, be very kind and sweet and put this person on a pedestal. Like that's something you don't realize you're doing, but it's happening. Or you can be like these red pill alpha dudes and be like, well, no, I don't care about that. I tried that and it didn't work. When there is a 45-degree angle, there's a 50-degree angle, there's a 55-degree angle, and you're thinking there's only two angles to take when it comes to relationships. And the in between, like you said, it's like I think Aladdin, the Disney movie, is a really good example. Like throughout the whole movie, he thinks that he has to be this prince to win over Princess Jasmine, and yet you're rooting for him the whole time. Like just be yourself, because the whole time, if he was just himself, the movie would have been 2 minutes.
This is the Frozen problem. If he just did the right thing, it would be a plot.
I didn't even watch it, so I don't know what you're talking
I've actually
about.
never seen Aladdin.
Really?
I just don't like those
This is the
kinds of
first time we're having
movies.
this moment.
Yeah, I was more of a South Park kid than an Aladdin kid.
Oh yeah, that's better.
You could tell by the language I use on this podcast.
Yeah,
I
we
still
both
can't
grew
get
up with
over that I
different
used
things.
the word fucking in between 10 and commandments last episode.
You just got output by the Christian community. So. by the bad Christian, everybody, good Christian should accept.
Hey,
you.
they should accept me.
They should, yeah. As you are. Another cool thing with a trajectory is something huge. I think when it comes to like dating, anxiety, just in general. Like I think about that game, Galactica, where you're the plane and you're moving left and right, and you're dodging these incoming asteroids. You know that game? It's like an arcade game where you just move left and right.
Yeah, is it called Galactica?
It might not be,
But it's something like that.
but just picture that where you're moving the toggle left and right. And a lot of people think that anxiety looks like dodging things that are coming towards you. Like you're dodging the obstacles, moving left and right. But I think that's just a very limited view. In reality, anxiety is sort of looking at the trajectory, imagining what's going to happen, and then dodging it. Because if we only dodge things as soon as they hit us, then that would be a very difficult task. In order to dodge something or to address an incoming threat, we don't just observe the threat, we observe the trajectory of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it comes to social anxiety, it's about observing hypotheticals that you're imagining in your head. And so when you're dealing with that, I would say that if you can somehow find a way to eliminate that headspace of thinking about how can this date go wrong? How can this go right? You will start to slowly feel a decrease in fear, because now your head's not filled with all these things that are thinking of trajectory, and now you can actually exist, which is counter to anxiety in the present moment.
You're creating ghosts
Yeah.
as you're describing it. Like you're creating ghosts, and a part of growing is recognizing that dodging ghosts is inherently a waste of time because they're ghosts. You know what I mean?
I like that. That's good. Yeah. You
Uh,
literally are dodging things that don't exist.
Yeah, and that takes energy, and I think like and a lot of times it really, I get a kick out of it when I tell people that I'm deeply introverted. I mean, I literally hang out with you and Wes, and that's pretty much my entire social, and my clients, which I consider hanging out. They're like, dude, I'm paying you, and I'm like, no, let's chill. Like, what?
I love hanging with clients.
but so people always get like so surprised when I tell them I'm introverted. But I think what I learned over time was like, it's not so much that I don't need to be a certain way in social situations. Like, I think I do come across as very good in social situations for the most part, but I don't need that. What I needed back when I was younger and I needed to work on was my self-worth. Because ultimately, I think that most social anxiety is rooted in a low self-worth, which is rooted in a lot of unnecessary shame. So if you, and that's why it's this belief, this self-perception. I'm lacking something that other people aren't lacking. And therefore, a lot of the energy I devote to hiding that is going into the way I navigate my social world. I'm going to hide the fact that I'm missing something other people have. And that is draining. And that makes me not want to be around people as much. And that's, I think, the hardest part of growing with social anxiety. Like to this day, no matter what, I'm going to feel social anxiety whenever I do something in a social environment. It just happens. Like I can't, but I accept it. I have more of an attitude of accepting that. But what I don't accept is this idea that I'm lacking something inherently. That's something I no longer accept and no longer believe.
Dang, that's deep and tied to your experience. It's similar to like mine when it comes to acceptance. For me, I learned that anxiety is, I experience anxiety when my reactions get in the way. And I think it's because I grew up watching a lot of big reactions and I judged it so hard. So my goal then became, how can I be the most stoic person in the room? And that got built into me. And then now as an adult, it's hard for the emotions to come out unless I feel like I'm pushing them out. That's changed over time because I've noticed that and worked on it. But for a while, I was like, wait, do I just not accept that I'm a little bit more, I guess, more monotone or still or stoic? But I realized that stoicism was a reaction to my initial, because I was never stoic as a kid. I was
No
so
kids fucking Marcus Aurelius, okay?
My sister still has quote unquote trauma because I would just like devour food and just be so like extrovert with everything. And so for me now, I think this is helpful for a lot of
Sorry,
people with anxiety.
I got the image of you eating ribs at the stand-up comedy show we went to.
Just grubbing.
Jacob, we went to stand-up comedy a few weeks ago, and he had a Flintstone-sized beef rib that he took to the show.
I wanted to eat it in front during the show so they could make fun of me. That's how much of this work I'm doing. But Vinny was like, no, that's too far.
I was like, I cannot deal with that.
Oh, man. No, but I think a lot of people can relate to that struggle of, like, if you have social anxiety, you might be someone who's inhibiting your emotions a whole lot. You might be really scared that sweating, or you might be afraid of saying something so firmly you're going to feel like you're yelling. But to heal that is acceptance, but also experimenting sometimes with throwing your voice out in the void and just seeing what happens. Because sometimes you feel like you have to say the exact right thing, and you feel like you have to say it at the exact right volume and right pitch. But really what's happening is you're being so careful with your voice and your expressions that you people don't get to see you. And then social experiences start to feel like so much work. And it's not because you are pretending to be something you're not, but it's because you're holding back something that you are. And so one of the ways that I felt like people can work towards that growth is by talking louder and just seeing how that feels. You might even feel like you're yelling at somebody when in reality you're just talking at a normal level volume. I even noticed that in myself during one of the podcast episodes that I felt like I was talking at a very loud pitch. And then we watched the clip back and my voice got not captured by the mic.
You're like an NPR host, and we're in episode
Episode 6.
But your self-perception was off, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
The barometer. And I think that's something helpful for people that are really analyzing their social anxiety is realize that you have a false perception of what it means to press go with your body and that how that connects with reality. And that's not just because you have bad training, but that's because that's always true of every single human being. Your expression and how you imagine that expression exists out in the world is always going to be off by at least 1%. So you working towards growth ought to be this experimentation rather than this assumption that, oh, I spoke and then now I screwed up because I felt this way when I spoke. I think really ideally, if you want to actually identify what's happening, the first thing to do is accept it, who you are, and say, I'm perfect the way I am, and watch a clip of yourself and see what's actually happening and see if you're holding yourself back or throwing yourself out too much.
That alone is extremely exposing for someone with social anxiety. I mean, but what you're saying is like someone with social anxiety, they don't trust their gas enough and they rely too much on their brakes.
Ooh, yeah.
And that's a really difficult thing to overcome because, like I said previously, when we do something over and over again, it becomes this conditioned experience that over time turns into feeling like our natural existence. It's like, no, like this is just how I am. Is it just how you are? Is it just how you are? Or is it what you've convinced yourself you are in order to navigate your situation more effectively? And another thought I had was like, this goes back to this idea. So you were saying like someone with social anxiety, they might have this idea in their head of the way I navigate this more effectively is I have to be perfect, right? I have to not make any mistakes. I can't sweat when I give a speech and blah, 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 blah. And this is the thing that keeps them stuck because the image in their head of growth is actually the thing that's keeping them stuck. And so that's why oftentimes when I finally can crack that image with the client and we develop a more realistic view of what a healthy social interaction looks like, they're almost relieved. They're like, wait, I don't have to do all this stuff?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, that's easier.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and I think that makes you a little bit more like the steps you take towards charisma and looking a certain way are actually all the steps required to keep you from being a charismatic person. Because if you try to make your speech perfect and you're trying to make it so fine-tuned that you're so structured in this box, then you start to eliminate all of the actual things that make you like charismatic, which is you want to pull people to a world that's really exciting to you. And the moment that you start to dumb down that excitement and you start to pull back on that because you think it's either imperfect, you're avoidant, and you feel like you don't want people to see that as weak or whatever, you become afraid of steamrolling people, and then nobody sees passion on your face anymore. Nobody sees the perfect imperfection of human communication as you're like, and that's why I think people, when they see you get lost on your words, even when you're talking, they're like, oh, wait, that's real. This isn't scripted. You know, he's actually thinking and talking at the same time. And people get excited about that in movies, even though they're actually just acting. But I think there's something to be said about, there's something about imperfection that draws people in, and you're robbing people of that when you really try to be perfect in your communication.
I think especially now, like there is this interesting movement towards authenticity that I feel like is in direct reaction to the way boomers posture their persona. And authenticity is becoming much more of a value than someone saying the things that you agree with. Like I'd rather vote for an authentic politician who I disagree with than someone who I more agree with but feels kind of phony. And I think it's because authenticity, it's grounded in something more that feels truer, you know? And when someone says the wrong word or I always find that like Well, there are little signs that someone is more authentic, and I like those kinds of people. Like, for instance, if someone says, "What does that word mean?" Like, instead of just nodding along, pretending like they know,
Mhm.
that to me is like a good dude. If someone is asked a question, they're like, "Oh, I actually, I never really got into that," as opposed to pretending like they know what they're talking about. Like, I think that's such a more honest and earnest person. And I'd much rather be around someone like that than someone who's presenting as confident, but deep down, it doesn't really feel that way.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, that brings out a good question, I think. How do you get real confidence as someone with social anxiety that wants to fit in? What does real confidence look like? Because I could easily see the work being difficult of like, well, I want to get more comfortable being, I don't know, louder or whatever. But then you also are afraid of, not fitting in and all that. Like, how do you get real confidence with authenticity?
I think even within that question is a double bind that creates no possible answer. You can't gain real confidence while trying to fit in. The two are mutually exclusive. A confident person is confident because they stand on what they are, despite the fact that it might uh, rub someone the wrong way. Like if you have an image of someone who's truly confident, they're confident because they know who they are through themselves, not through the feedback or approval of others. And so ultimately, I've always found characters in TV like Dwight Schrute to be the most appealing because they are confident without needing other people to approve of them.
Mm.
I'm going to be weird. I'm weird in very unique ways, but I very much own that weirdness. I'm not hiding it, And so I think ultimately the way you can be truly confident is also the same way you can navigate shame and expel it from yourself, which is start acting in accordance with what you believe to be true and not what you think other people will accept you.
Yeah, I like that a lot too when it comes to dating because like I feel like a lot of times people get put off with dating because not because like you're doing something that the other person thinks is weird, but it's more your reaction to what they think is weird that throws them off and they think is weird.
Hmm.
Because if you're on a date with somebody and they see that you're wearing a yellow shirt and they make an offhanded joke of like that I hate yellow, and they're lighthearted and they're being judgmental but in a funny way, and then you're like, "Oh yeah, well I picked it up from I don't know, Old Navy," and they're like, "You shop at Old Navy? Like this is weird." And then they respond with, "Oh no, like you're freaked out." And it was like it was never about the shirt that you wore to the date that made it not go well. It was more so that your confidence was shaken by this other person's opinion that wasn't even deeply serious. It was more of a joke, and so that hypervigilance around that, I think, is the absence of confidence, not rooted in the self.
Well, and 100%. And part of the issue with social anxiety is you're, I mean, you're operating, if you look at the behaviors of someone with social anxiety, at the core of your social interaction is this constant information gathering. Like you're constantly seeking feedback about the way you come across in the world from how others are interacting with you. And that's why you're hypervigilant. It's like, oh, I wore this collared shirt and I want to know if people like it. And this person's kind of looking at me weird. Maybe they don't like it. So all of a sudden you're fixated on other people giving you information about the way you come across. So at the very core of the issue is the basic premise. I don't know who I am, therefore I need others to tell me. So the reverse of that, which I think it would describe a confident person pretty well, which is I know who I am, therefore other people giving me data is not that valuable to me. Like it doesn't really matter because who I am is not predicated on their acceptance of it.
Right. You're just observing and accepting. Um, like if you're in one way I think that is helpful to do that on like a date or whatever is if you're talking with someone, try to observe three things about their face. What's their eye color? What does their nose look like? What color are their shoes? And then say something bold and true about yourself that you can say unapologetically. If you have social anxiety and you make a practice of trying that, then you might start to feel like the stakes are actually a little lower. And then here, you're more like here, just to kind of open the door to that habitual response to go up here and be hypervigilant. And to be honest, I made that one up just now.
Well, but just to go off of that, you can't both be in your head and in the experience you're having. Like it's a one or the other, you know? If you're in your head, you're not having the experience. You know, you're choosing and I think this happens often with people with social anxiety and with performance anxiety, which is in moments where it's triggered are moments when they panic and retreat into their minds because they have a feeling of safety in their minds. You know, there is inherently a lack of trust in being present in those moments, and therefore they are conditioned into retreating into their very comfortable, safe, familiar mind, even though in their mind is an awful experience.
Yeah. Yeah. You kind of have to, because I like to think about that from like a sports analogy. Like if you're playing basketball, there's a moment where you go in the team huddle and you're looking at the playbook together. That's the time to think, to reflect. And when you go out into the actual court, if you get past the ball and then you're like thinking about the play in the moment, you're going to get a backcourt violation because you're thinking.
You're trying to control the outcome rather than being part of the experience.
Yeah. And so what you really need to do is just at that moment say screw it and just dribble the ball and do whatever you need to. And if you screw up, then that's fine. If you do good, that's fine too. But at least you gave yourself a chance to gamble and also a chance to realize it's a game at the end of the day. You're playing.
But at its core, the real issue is when someone with performance anxiety, the real issue is I don't trust being in my body in this moment. I don't trust the fact that my body is going to react in the way it's supposed to react. Therefore, I panic and go into a very familiar part of my body, which is my mind's, even if it's at the expense of performance. And you know, I always found it interesting that so I think performance anxiety really at its core is someone trying to control for something they can't control, which is the outcome. Like you can do things that will improve the possibility of a good outcome, like training and strategizing. Yeah. But ultimately, when the play is happening, the play is happening. When you shoot the ball, you don't have control over whether it goes in. When it's literally out of your hands, it's literally out of your hands. But I found that with baseball. Baseball is one of the least control of outcome sports. Like someone is considered a great baseball player if 70% of the time they don't get a hit. Like that's how little in control baseball is. And so what I found interesting about baseball is it's also the sport where people are the most superstitious. You know, people are really superstitious because they have the least control, and therefore the way they mitigate their performance anxiety is by, you know, not changing their socks and all this shit that they otherwise, you know, it would make them panic if they didn't do it. What?
I was thinking about what you're saying. I was literally just was existing in the moment. And I was like, oh, wait, shit, I should talk.
You were in your body. You trusted your body. That's good.
I did. That's good. I love it.
Are we brushing up against time?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So how do we...
That was my first curse word on the podcast.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Sorry, Mom.
So how do we wrap this up quickly?
I would say, you know, when it comes to social anxiety, I think the present moment is a really good thing to come back to. Like if you can find ways to exist imperfectly, that's the place to go. And that's the priority is not the outcome, but more so you know, that you existed and failed or succeeded. Like it doesn't necessarily matter what the outcome is, and
it's about the intention.
And also if people have questions about, or if you want us to talk about other topics, we can talk about anything really, as long as it's like legal or not bad, or like more about dating. Like, what do people want? Like, give us more comments. We read them
For sure. All right. Sounds good. We'll see you next episode.